I never expected my birthday to become a mirror reflecting truths about myself and the marriage I thought I understood. I had planned everything weeks ahead with careful thought. Nothing extravagant, just a small, intimate evening at our house with a handful of close friends. My hope was simple. A night of laughter, teasing that carried warmth, a sense of connection that felt, even briefly, like real love. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old, married to Claire for 12 years, and I've always seen myself as the steady, calm presence. The one who keeps life orderly, who smooths out the rough edges of every day. That afternoon, Claire had been quieter than usual, distant in a way I couldn't immediately explain. I brushed it off, telling myself it was the stress of her job, or perhaps just one of those moods that pass quickly. Determined to make the evening special, I tried to carry the weight of everything. I cooked her favorite meal, tidied the house meticulously, and arranged small touches of decoration with the subtle care I hoped she would notice. I wanted tonight to feel personal, to feel like us for just a few hours. A pause in the routine, a chance to remind each other of the life we built together. When the first guests began arriving, everything seemed perfectly normal. Laughter bubbled from the kitchen as friends complimented the food, swapped stories, and sipped drinks. I poured myself one, leaned against the counter, and observed Claire smiling politely, laughing in all the right places, but never really joining in. It was then that he appeared. At first, it was almost imperceptible. The slight stiffening of her posture, the glint in her eyes that had long since disappeared in my presence. My heart froze. It was Tom, her ex from college, the one she had spoken about endlessly when we first met. The stories of how kind he was, how he made her feel alive, how different life seemed with him. That was years ago, or so I told myself. Their initial greetings were casual, polite. I wanted to step in, make a joke, mask my unease with humor. But Claire leaned toward him, her laughter lighter, more frequent than seemed natural, reacting to things that weren't even funny. Her hand brushed his arm once, a touch so fleeting yet so electrifying, sending a pang through me that I hadn't felt in years. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, that perhaps it was harmless nostalgia. But when she placed her hand on his shoulder, lingering just a beat too long, I saw the way he looked at her, the way he remembered the girl she once was, and perhaps the part of her I had been struggling to preserve all these years. I was rooted in place, voice and body frozen. Each laugh that followed, each casual brush of her hand against his arm, felt like a tiny erasure of all the years I had poured into our life together. I remembered the countless times I had been present quietly, fixing things around the house, supporting her family, creating moments of intimacy that were simple but meaningful, trying to be attentive, present, caring. I thought of the sacrifices no one saw, the small gestures that had faded into the background, invisible in their constancy. And then in the cruel clarity of that moment I understood, she was enjoying this. Not merely his company, but the undeniable effect she still had over me. The power I had unconsciously given her, the way I had allowed her to matter more than I mattered to myself. I finished my drink with deliberate slowness, keeping my expression neutral, my stance casual. I moved across the room, engaging with Mark and Sophie as if nothing had shifted inside me, hoping she wouldn't notice the subtle trembling in my hands. But she did. She glanced over, smiled, and reached for Tom again. That smile, the one that had once been mine alone, now belonged elsewhere. For a fleeting moment I considered confronting her, raising my voice, making a scene. But as I watched her I realized that no drama, no words shouted across a room would carry the weight I needed them to. Silence, absence, detachment, those were louder than any argument. I checked the clock. The night was still young, the house alive with conversation, music, and clinking glasses. I allowed myself a small private smile. I had given this marriage everything I could. For years I had believed that love alone could close the gaps that had silently grown between us. But love without recognition, without respect, without reciprocal care, it is hollow. And tonight that hollowness was undeniable, bitter, and raw. I stole one last look at her, at the hand resting lightly on him, at the laughter that had once been ours together. I understood in that moment what I had lost. Not just her, but the illusion that my devotion alone could hold her in place. The realization burned quietly but fiercely. Sometimes the hardest lessons come not from arguments or betrayal, but from witnessing what has quietly slipped away. I came to understand with a clarity that was both sudden and painful, that staying any longer would mean living a lie. It would mean bowing to the illusion of contentment that Claire had chosen for herself, an illusion that had no place for me anymore. The realization was quiet but irrevocable. I didn't need to make a scene, didn't need to force my departure to be noticed or mourned. I simply rose from where I sat, feeling a weight shift in my chest, and stepped out into the night. There was no slam of the door, no shout, no dramatic exit. I allowed the calm darkness outside to embrace me, to take in my presence and carry it away as I walked. My absence would speak far louder than any confrontation, any raised voice could. The air was crisp against my face, sharp and invigorating, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant city streets. Each step I took away from the house felt like reclaiming fragments of myself I hadn't realized had been stolen over the years. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the release of something heavy that had been pressing down on me for far too long. The heaviness of restraint, the endless pretending, the slow erosion of my dignity, something intangible yet suffocating, had lifted. For the first time in a long while I felt light. I got into my car and let it carry me aimlessly through the quiet streets, headlights cutting swaths of brightness through the darkness, tracing roads that had once been lined with laughter and shared memories. Each familiar turn and corner brought a flicker of recollection. Our conversations, the small moments we had cherished, the laughter that had once belonged to us. But these echoes no longer held the power to wound. They felt distant now, like sepia photographs fading in an attic trunk, preserved but untouchable. And in that distance I discovered relief, a strange sense of liberation in the recognition that what had once bound me so tightly no longer had a grip. By the time I reached Adam's driveway, a quiet resolution had settled over me. There was no urgency, no need to explain myself fully yet. Adam was the kind of friend who understood without interrogating, who could read the subtle collapse behind someone's eyes and know when silence carried more weight than words. He opened the door before I even knocked, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Danny, what happened?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I didn't answer immediately. I hung my jacket, feeling some of the tension ease from my shoulders, though a small part of it clung stubbornly. Finally I said, "I left. I just left." Adam's nod was slow, as if he absorbed not just my words but the weight behind them. Did it have to do with Claire? He didn't need me to say anything more. The look on my face, the exhaustion and subtle ache in my posture, said everything. It had been her smile that betrayed me, the way she had leaned into Tom's shoulder that night, her laughter no longer ours. The betrayal wasn't merely physical. It was the realization that she had forgotten who I was, or worse, chosen to forget. Silence settled between us, heavy but comforting. Adam poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to me without asking, as if he already understood that action alone could communicate the empathy words might fail to capture. I stared into the amber liquid, reflecting on the years of quiet compromise, the small slights I had endured in the name of love, the gradual indifference I had tolerated, all because I had clung to the hope that us still existed. But hope alone cannot sustain a bond stripped of respect. I murmured almost to myself, "I guess she'll regret it." The words felt strange on my tongue, foreign, yet not entirely unwelcome. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about the truth, the inescapable fact that choices carry consequences, and mine had been to preserve my dignity. Adam's nod affirmed it. "She will. People always do when they realize what they've let slip through their fingers." Hours passed, yet our conversation mattered less than the mere act of being understood. There was solace in being seen, in having someone acknowledge the emotional weight I carried without judgment. I didn't check my phone, didn't return to the party, and didn't allow the outside world to intrude. I let the night pass untouched, allowing Claire's celebration to continue without my presence, my absence quietly making its own statement. Later, lying on Adam's couch, I realized this departure was not simply about Claire, Tom, or a single act of betrayal. It was a reclamation of myself, a refusal to tolerate the gradual erosion of value and identity that had accumulated over years of small compromises. In the stillness of the night I could finally breathe. The liberation was bitter, tinged with the weight of what had been lost, yet profoundly freeing. I had no desire to run or lash out. I had merely recognized my worth and acted without hesitation or guilt, a simple yet monumental affirmation of self-respect. The following morning, I didn't reach for messages or updates. I moved slowly, brewing coffee and stepping outside into sunlight that felt ordinary and mundane, yet paradoxically alive with possibility. Leaving had peeled away a burden I hadn't fully understood I carried, and in that ordinary light, life felt tangible, immediate, and mine. Weeks later, I learned from mutual friends that Claire had asked after me, her questions tinged with curiosity, regret, and a sudden awareness of the absence she had created. I smiled quietly. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. My silence had conveyed more than words ever could. In walking away without drama, I had shown her the value of what she had forsaken. And in that quiet absence I rediscovered something far more enduring than fleeting affection or old memories. Respect for myself. No laughter, no touch, no memory, and no betrayal could ever take that away. In leaving silently, I had arrived at something immeasurably greater. A restored sense of self, solid, unyielding, and profoundly liberating.